Hey everybody, it's Brian with Retired at 40. Welcome back to Live Life Simple Kitchen. Today we're doing meat. It's been a long time since I've done any kind of meat video, and we're doing something kind of special today, something that's not as common as pork or beef or even chicken. Today we're doing venison. Venison, of course, being deer loin or deer steaks. And if you're fortunate enough to be a hunter and get venison yourself, or you're married to a hunter, or you have friends and family that are hunters and you have access to venison, then today's video is for you. So there's lots of ways you can cook venison. A lot of people just cook them on the grill. You can use it in chili, you can use it for fajitas, all kinds of different stuff. But today we're gonna try it on the grill. I'm actually gonna try it on the smoker. But the grill is one of the hardest ways, I think, to prepare venison, because venison is not a fatty meat. It's very, very lean, and that causes it to dry out very easily. And if you're not careful, before you know it, you're chewing on a shoe instead of a delicious steak. But one of the great benefits of doing meats and certain other things in the freeze dryer is that you're removing all moisture content out of whatever you're freeze drying. So that allows you to rehydrate in anything that's a moisture or a liquid, which in the case of meat means you can just infuse that meat with all kinds of different stuff besides water. You can use any kind of brines, you can use soy sauce, you can even use beer or bourbon, anything you can imagine. And there is no better way to infuse chicken or beef or pork or shrimp, or in our case venison, than freeze drying it and then rehydrating it in that liquid. So I'm going to show my way of rehydrating with my ingredients. I encourage you to get creative with this because the options are really limitless. But let's get started in this freeze-dried venison. So we have about 1.5 pounds of venison today that we're going to try and prepare. And we shouldn't need to trim any fat off of this because venison, like I said, is a very lean meat. It's very red meat. And we're going to want to trim these into 5 or 6 ounce portions for a couple reasons. One, it's going to help them cook better, but more important than that, it's going to take forever, if even possible, for this entire loin to freeze dry because of the thickness and just because of the density of this meat. Now I'll go ahead and zoom in just so you can see. If you're not familiar with venison, it's very red, it's very low fat and lean. And I'm going to give you a spoiler alert: if you're expecting a rare, bloody steak when this is all done, then it's just not going to happen. The red that you're used to seeing in a steak is actually, which is it's a liquid, and it's actually going to get absorbed and taken out just like any kind of water or other liquid would in the freeze dryer. But that doesn't mean the juiciness and the flavor are going to be gone. In fact, we can actually amplify that when we rehydrate with whatever we choose to infuse it with. Okay, so unlike most of my videos, this is ready to go. There's virtually no preparation other than just cutting it into the proper size. You could probably poke some holes in the middle as well, just to help along the freeze drying process. But I'm going to put these back in the freezer. I'm going to freeze them solid, because what I'm really anticipating is how this is going to rehydrate and be able to pull in everything that we're using as a brine, more or less. But before we do that, I want to give you a word of warning. If you choose to do anything uncooked in your freeze dryer, use your brain, use common sense. Separate anything that's raw from things that you don't want possibly contaminated. Make sure you're labeling your bags. Make sure you're labeling other things. So that way in the future, there's no way that you can potentially mix something up with something that's raw or uncooked with something that is already cooked. And also, once you're done freeze drying something that's uncooked, make sure you take the proper precautions before you put something else back into the freeze dryer. Make sure you're cleaning it, sanitizing it, just so there's no confusion. One good way is to actually mix this with some ingredients that you might use with it. So you could put some onions in with this, put in other raw meats or uncooked things. So for now, I'm going to throw this in the deep freezer overnight. We're going to get this good and frozen solid, and then we'll go to the freeze dryer and get this started. And if you have a venison recipe that you'd like to share or just a tip, there's lots of ways you can get a hold of us. You can join our Facebook or MeWe group. There's thousands and thousands of like-minded members who are freeze dryers and preppers and homesteaders, where you can pick up lots of knowledge and you can also share your knowledge. You can also click the subscribe button for Live Life Simple, where you can leave us a comment. You can click the bell to get notifications of future videos that come out. For us, that's every Sunday at 8 a.m. You can also hit the like button if you found this or other videos helpful. For any of the products and accessories you see in our videos, you can pick those up at freezedryingsupplies.com. And if you're considering purchasing a freeze dryer, consider using our affiliate link. It helps us out, it helps you out, and that in turn helps out the entire freeze drying community. It keeps us up to date with everything that's going on with freeze drying. All right, so here we go. In goes our venison. I hope I didn't cut those too thick, but we're gonna find out. I'll see you guys after this is all complete. All right, let's see what this venison looks like after 54 hours and 13 minutes. So let's go rehydrate this. All right, there's our freeze-dried venison. The thing I love about steaks like this, doesn't matter what kind they are, is they pretty much just weigh nothing. This only weighs 1.75 ounces now. And this was a 6-ounce venison loin before we freeze-dried it. So the interesting part of this is we're actually doing this whole process backwards as what we would normally do. Normally you would brine the meat before you put it on the grill. We actually took the raw meat, freeze-dried it, taking all of the juice, all of the moisture content, any of the liquids out of it, and then we're gonna infuse that brine back into the meat. So that's what we're gonna do now. You're gonna want a half a gallon of water. You're gonna want half a cup of soy sauce, and then a quarter of a cup of brown sugar. This recipe normally calls for a quarter of a cup of kosher salt as well, but it's gonna be very, very easy to make this way too salty because we're actually pulling in way more of the brine, making all of that brine just way more intense than it normally would be in something like this. So just like any brine, we're gonna just stir this up. I'm using a whisk. We want all that brown sugar to dissolve. If you want to put extra salt into this, you would do the same with the salt. You just want to stir this until all of that dissolves into the liquid. All right, we're ready to dunk these things. And you'll be able to see right away that these just soak up water just like a sponge. These are thick loins. They're gonna take a while to take in all of that liquid. So I think normally we would leave them in a brine for about an hour. I'm gonna cover them. We'll leave them in for an hour. I doubt they'll be anywhere near ready. We're probably gonna be looking at overnight for our best results. So I'm gonna cover this. I'm gonna stick it in the fridge and then just keep an eye on it. And then in the meantime, we're gonna make the rub for the smoker. And for that, we're just gonna do a tablespoon of pepper. We're gonna do a tablespoon of paprika. We're gonna do a tablespoon of garlic powder, and then half a tablespoon of onion powder. And that's all there is to that. We can set this aside and we'll put this on just before we go onto the grill. So there's our venison after being in the fridge overnight, and you can see that this is more of a brown color now than a red color. I did throw it in a colander and I drained off just kind of any of the excess liquid. The nice thing about meats is they won't oversaturate. They're only going to pull in as much moisture as they need. So you just kind of drain off anything that's extra on there. Let these get to room temperature. Now we're going to put our dry rub on these, and I'm going to get the smoker going because we're actually going to smoke these to 140 degrees. So before we throw these on the smoker, I'm just going to drizzle them with olive oil on both sides. And I'm going to take just a silicone brush, cover them on all sides, and then we're going to hit them with our rub. And we're going to do the same to the other side. Okay, well, I've got the smoker going, and you were probably not expecting me to smoke these. Most people throw them on a grill because they want like a venison steak. It's really easy to dry out venison because there's such a low fat content. So if you take your time on it and you slow smoke it, just like anything that's slow smoked, it stays really juicy. It keeps all that juice on the inside, so that's what we're gonna do. Keep your smoker in that 200-ish degree range, and we're just gonna bring it up to 140 degrees, and then when it gets there, it should be all good. All right, these are all good. I'm gonna go ahead and pull these off. They look really, really good, but before I bust into these, I'm gonna cover them and we're gonna let them rest for about 10 minutes. This is gonna be probably a real important part of keeping these things tender and making them turn out the way we want them to. All right, without any further ado, here's our freeze-dried venison steaks. They look really good, they're super tender. And I'll get zoomed in on these as close as I can. And if these taste as good as they look, then we're really onto something here. They're really good. I don't think you can even really tell the difference other than the color, which I'm sure I'll get plenty of comments about. Again, because they look gray does not mean they're not rare, medium, etc., especially when it's freeze-dried. I'll be really honest, I was not expecting venison, which to me is one of the toughest meats to cook, to actually turn out one of the better meats that I've ever freeze-dried before. But I'd have no problem eating all of that. This is a big win in my book today. In the meantime, this is Retired at 40. Remember to live life simple. We'll catch you next week.